He, anthropologist, had spent months preparing for his fieldwork in Caracas. Every academic paper, every news report, every policy brief had prepared him for the same encounter with a broken society, failed institutions, economic collapse, social disintegration. He arrived with cameras to document the ruins of modernity. Instead, he discovered something that challenged his entire academic training. He found a society that had not collapsed but transformed, not failed but adapted. The Venezuela he encountered was not the Venezuela that existed in Western imagination. It was something entirely new, a post-institutional society that had developed alternative mechanisms for everything from commerce to governance to survival itself. Sanalanan Aksin, the most profound aspect of the Venezuelan story, is not what broke down, but what emerged from the breakdown. This is not a tale of failure. This is a tale of reinvention. And the world's inability to see this reinvention reveals the rigid categories through which modernity understands itself. The institutional mirage. When political scientists study Venezuela, they see a textbook case of institutional decay. The courts stopped functioning independently. The legislature became a rubber stamp. The military entered politics. Democratic norms eroded. In the academic literature, this process has a name: competitive authoritarianism. But this analysis assumes that formal institutions are what make society function. The anthropologist discovered something different. As formal institutions weakened, informal networks strengthened. Extended families became economic units. Neighborhood associations became governance structures. Social media groups became financial markets. The society had not collapsed. It had reorganized itself around different principles. This reorganization was invisible to external observers because they were looking for familiar structures. They searched for banks and found Bitcoin wallets. They searched for supermarkets and found community kitchens. They searched for political parties and found WhatsApp groups. The transformation was hidden in plain sight, camouflaged by conceptual blindness. The persistence of daily life in Venezuela confounds every prediction of state failure. Children still attend school. Hospitals still operate. Electricity flows. Internet connections work. Public transportation runs. This is not the profile of a collapsed state. This is the profile of a state that has been radically reimagined by its population. The currency revolution. In 2018, when inflation reached 1,000,000%, traditional economic analysis declared Venezuela's economy finished. Currency had lost all meaning. Exchange rates had become meaningless. The monetary system had collapsed. Economists predicted complete economic breakdown within months. But something remarkable happened instead. The Venezuelan people simply stopped using the collapsed currency for anything important. They moved to dollars for large transactions, to cryptocurrency for savings, to barter for daily goods. They created a parallel economy that operated according to completely different rules than the official one. This transition was not chaotic. It was systematic, sophisticated, and largely self-organized. Street vendors developed complex pricing systems that could adjust to daily inflation. Families created savings strategies using multiple currencies. Businesses built supply chains that operated across different monetary systems simultaneously. The world watched this transformation and saw only chaos. But the anthropologists saw something extraordinary, a real-time demonstration of how societies can reinvent their most fundamental institutions when those institutions stop serving human needs. The Venezuelan monetary revolution was perhaps the most successful case of financial innovation in recent history. It simply happened outside the framework of formal economics. The mobility paradox, the global narrative about Venezuelan migration follows a simple pattern. 7 million people fled a collapsing country. This is presented as evidence of failure, proof that the system cannot sustain human life. But this interpretation reveals more about how we think about nationality than about Venezuelan experience. The anthropologist met families who had members living in Colombia, the United States, Spain, and Venezuela simultaneously. They did not see this as exile, but as expansion. They had created transnational networks that allowed them to navigate economic uncertainty by distributing risk across multiple countries and currencies. This was not displacement. This was adaptation. Venezuelan society had become globally distributed, connected by family ties, WhatsApp groups, and remittance flows that operated independent of any government policy. The migration was not a sign of social breakdown, but of social sophistication, the ability to reorganize human relationships across borders in response to changing conditions. Western observers interpreted this diaspora through the lens of refugee crisis, but many Venezuelan families saw it through the lens of opportunity expansion. They had turned geographical mobility into economic strategy, social insurance, and cultural preservation. The exodus was simultaneously the foundation of Venezuela's economic resilience. The perception crisis. The most striking aspect of international Venezuela coverage is not its inaccuracy, but its consistency. Every major outlet tells essentially the same story. Socialist policies failed. Corruption destroyed institutions. Economic collapse followed inevitably. This narrative uniformity suggests something deeper than journalistic bias. It suggests conceptual limitation. The story satisfies certain psychological needs in the international audience. It confirms that market economics are superior to state intervention. It validates the superiority of democratic institutions. It proves that resource wealth without proper governance leads to disaster. Venezuela becomes a morality tale that reinforces existing beliefs rather than challenging them. But this moralistic framework blinds observers to what is actually happening. They see political authoritarianism where Venezuelans see pragmatic adaptation. They see economic collapse where Venezuelans see creative transformation. They see social chaos where Venezuelans see community resilience. The misreading is systematic and profound. The anthropologist realized that Venezuela had become a Rorschach test for international observers. Everyone saw what their conceptual framework trained them to see. Economists saw market failure. Political scientists saw democratic decay. Journalists saw humanitarian crisis. But none of these perspectives captured the lived experience of Venezuelan adaptation and innovation. The parallel economy. By 2023, Venezuela had developed perhaps the world's most sophisticated informal economy. Street vendors accepted digital payments. Neighborhood associations operated currency exchange services. Social media groups facilitated complex barter networks. Professional services were priced in multiple currencies simultaneously. This parallel economy was not a temporary response to crisis. It was a permanent alternative to formal institutional structures that had proven inadequate. It operated according to principles of flexibility, community trust, and constant adaptation that formal institutions could not match. The transformation was most visible in small businesses. A typical Caracas restaurant might display prices in bolivars for legal compliance, accept payment in dollars, euros, or Bitcoin, offer employee salaries pegged to the dollar, and maintain supplier relationships based on informal credit networks that spanned multiple countries. This complexity was not chaos. It was sophisticated financial innovation emerging from necessity. Venezuelan entrepreneurs had created business models that could survive hyperinflation, currency controls, and institutional uncertainty simultaneously. They had solved problems that defeated formal economic planning. The resilience question. The persistence of Venezuelan society under extreme stress raises fundamental questions about how we understand social systems. If institutions are supposed to be the foundation of modern life, how does society function when those institutions collapse? If currency is supposed to be essential to economic activity, how does commerce continue when currency becomes worthless? The Venezuelan experience suggests that social systems are far more resilient and adaptive than institutional theory predicts. People create alternative structures when official ones fail. They develop new practices when old ones become inadequate. They innovate solutions that academics never anticipated. This resilience is not unique to Venezuela. It is a universal human capacity that becomes visible only under extreme conditions, but it challenges every assumption about development, governance, and economic organization that dominates international policy making. The anthropologist concluded his fieldwork with a disturbing insight: the international community's inability to understand Venezuelan adaptation was not just an intellectual failure, it was a barrier to effective policy. As long as the world insisted on seeing collapse where Venezuelans had built alternatives, no intervention could possibly succeed. The real Venezuelan crisis may not be economic or political. It may be the crisis of imagination that prevents the world from recognizing what Venezuelans have actually created. Because contrary to popular belief, the most spectacular failure in this story might not be Venezuelan governance. It might be international understanding.